Portland has a sound in winter that isn't rain so much as breath through a window that never quite seals. It gets in everywhere, under doors, into sleeves, into the small pockets where couples keep their secrets. I'd like to tell you I heard it the first time Tessa started setting her phone face down, but the truth is I told myself it was just the season. Accountants are good at explaining irregularities. We label them timing differences and keep moving. I'm Drew, 43, the kind of person who keeps a lid on the coffee beans because the smell leaks otherwise. I can tell you to the penny what our mortgage costs with escrow and what a case of LaCroix comes to after the city of Portland adds its little tax songs. I have a son, Logan 16, a lanky sprinter who can beat me out the door even on mornings when his bones clearly want another hour in bed. I have a wife, Tessa, who runs the front at a physical therapy clinic on Burnside with a smile that could get a parking meter to forgive you. We were a simple map for a long time. Home in Selwood, work downtown, Logan's school in Eastmoreland. Saturday runs along the Springwater corridor, even when it misted so hard the city blurred. Weeknights meant pasta on the stove, Logan's calculus worksheets on the table, Tessa's clinic stories about the runner who refuses to ice, or the retired roofer who insists on ladders. Sometimes I'd bring home spreadsheets and pretend she wanted to hear about depreciation schedules. She'd kiss my cheek mid-sentence and say, "You and your numbers," and I'd let the sentence fall. The cold arrived early the year things shifted, the kind of October that smelled like wet leaves and diesel. Tessa's phone learned a new habit of going dark if it wasn't in her hand. Her late nights multiplied. "Inventory audit," she said, which made me laugh because physio clinics don't stock anything a person counts by flashlight. She laughed too, but there was a lag in it, like a stream trying to push through leaves. I didn't snoop. I don't do that. I watched and I took notes I pretended were just in my head. Late night, late again, text, smile to someone she didn't turn toward me to share. I told myself after the holidays. People come undone a little in the holidays. A call came from school one Wednesday at 2017 p.m. The counselor, Dr. Moran, kind voice, precise sentences. Logan had been quiet enough to get noticed. "He's not in trouble," she said immediately. "He's doing fine, but he's holding something heavy and I can't tell if it belongs to him." I said I could come by. She said no need. "Just check on him," she said. "No need. Just check on him," she said. "Not with questions, with time." I'm good with numbers because they behave. People are worse. I took Logan to Burgerville and watched him build a tower out of ketchup packets. "You okay?" I asked, and he shrugged in that teenage way that says yes, no, and please don't make me translate. So I didn't. I drove us down to the path along the river where the rowing team drags boats on weekends, and we walked until our shoes made wet cloud prints on the cement. He finally said, "Mom's been weird. You want to tell me what weird means?" Like she's sleepwalking, except awake. And her phone is a Horcrux. "Hate that," I said, and the joke made him smile, barely. I don't use my kid as a probe. Whatever I was going to learn about Tessa wouldn't come through Logan. But his sentence tilted the room. That night, when he fell asleep in that teenage sprawl that occupies a whole bed and somehow still leaves one foot hanging off, I sat at the kitchen island and logged into our family plan to look at call detail. Not the content, the list. Numbers don't lie, but they don't tell a story by themselves. I looked for timing patterns, for counts. People leave a trail the way the rain does. A number started appearing at odd hours. Always after 9, often around 11:23, sometimes at lunch. The label said unknown, but the billing profile said Northeast Portland, a carrier with a decent record and poor customer service. I didn't reverse it, didn't hire anyone, didn't turn a spreadsheet into a knife. I wrote the number in my notebook and drew a circle around it like a warning on a map. Do not enter alone. I called a therapist before I called anyone else, not a couples counselor. A family therapist, a friend from my running group, swore by because she doesn't let people make the kid into a battlefield. Her name was Meredith Klaus. Her office smelled like cedar and tea bags. The first time I went alone, and I said something I hadn't said out loud. I think my wife is in love with someone else, and if she is, my job is to protect my son's mind. Dr. Klaus did not write it down like it was a revelation. She asked good questions that made my sentences stop hiding. "Do you want to be right?" she asked, "or do you want to be steady?" "Steady," I said immediately, surprised by the word coming out of my mouth with no bargaining attached. "Good," she said. "Then we make a plan that centers him. We do not draft him into the investigation. We build a soft landing." How? "You nail down a schedule that doesn't wobble if the adults wobble," she said. "You see me with him, together, before you see me with her. You arrange for him to have another safe adult to stay with if things get loud. You gather what you need, but you don't turn your home into a lab. And you practice sentences that are broad and true." "Broad and true?" I repeated. She nodded, like, "This house is safe. Your routine will not break. The adults will handle the adult parts." I asked if I should tell Tessa I was seeing a therapist. "Do you want a fight?" she asked. "Or a plan?" "Plan," I said again. She smiled. I called my brother Nate, who lives in Hillsboro and smells like sawdust and motor oil no matter how much soap you throw at him. Nate runs a little custom furniture shop that survives on couples who want a table that outlives them. He loves Logan like he loves his tools, steady, patient, proud. "I need a favor," I said, and he said, "Finally," like he'd been waiting years for me to admit humans aren't DIY. I explained. I might need Logan to stay with him for a bit. Not because Logan was in danger, because I wanted to keep it that way. No drama, no yelling, no cops, just a different roof, a project to get under his fingernails, some distance so he doesn't have to be air traffic control while the adults circle. "Say when," Nate said. "I'll tell him I need an apprentice who knows what Twitch is. We'll make a bench that doesn't wobble." "Call it a capstone," I said. "Make it sound like school." "It is," Nate said. "It's shop class for staying human." The next irregularity arrived in a shoebox. Tessa likes to clear the counter of receipts into boxes labeled by month. In November's box, a slip peeped out that didn't belong. A bar I didn't recognize on Alberta. Charges at 11:52 p.m. A tip that made sense only if someone felt generous or guilty. Our credit card, joint, the signature loop looking nothing like mine. I didn't pick it up as if it were a snake. I looked at it the way I look at a line item that doesn't reconcile. Calm, like it will talk if I don't tell it what to say. I put it back in the box and closed the lid. I booked a session with Dr. Klaus for me and Logan. I told Tessa the truth. I'm worried about Logan being stressed. I'd like to take him to a family therapist I trust. Will you come later, after I take him? She tilted her head like I'd tried to trick her with a word problem. "Are we okay?" she asked, doing that thing where she looks sincere and also a little bored. "I'm not asking about we yet," I said. "I'm talking about him." She wanted to object to the jurisdiction. She wanted me to use our son as a passport back into her. She also wanted to stop having a conversation that required her to step in my direction. "Fine," she said. "Later." So I took Logan. We sat in that cedar room, and he peeled the label off a water bottle until his nails got the plastic under control. Dr. Klaus didn't make him confess. She asked about track and about the one teacher who makes algebra feel like a marsh you sing in. She told him his brain is doing the good work of getting bigger and that sometimes that makes the world feel smaller until it catches up. She asked about sleep and said his tight chest at night wasn't a personal failure, but a fire alarm that shouldn't be unplugged. We'd learn what set it off, and we'd make a plan to keep him from burning. She told him nothing. He made the adults do what the adults do, and that his job wasn't to be a detective or a referee. On the way home, he said, "She was cool." "Like her," I said. He nodded and looked out the window at a city that couldn't stop being green even in the gray. Can I go to Uncle Nate's more? He asked. Quick, a test balloon he didn't want to watch too closely. You want to? I asked. Or you need to? Want, he said, then added softer, and maybe need. Okay, I said. We'll make it a project. He'll teach you to tell wood by smell. You'll come home for school, sports, and to sleep here until we say otherwise. But you can spend weekends there. And if we ever need a weeknight, we call it a special project week. He breathed all the way down like his lungs had been holding their breath. One thing about being an accountant, we like rules when they keep people from getting hurt. I looked up our clinic's public employee handbook because Tessa's clinic belongs to a bigger network that actually writes things down. There it was, page 9. No relationships with vendors, no after-hours socializing with patients, an entire paragraph about personal phone use and records. I didn't print it as ammunition. I put it in the facts folder with the call log page that showed the northeastern numbers frequency climbing like a bad chart. I made an appointment with a family law attorney because not knowing the rules is how you get surprised. Her name was Amelia Chen, downtown near the courthouse, framed degrees and a desk so clean it looked like a stage. She asked for my priorities. I said, Logan's schedule stays stable. I don't want my son in a courtroom if we can keep him out. I want the adult conversations to happen with adults in a room with a whiteboard and a timer. Do you want the house? She asked. I want a calendar, I said, and watched her face adjust. She nodded. Good. We start with a proposed parenting plan, joint legal custody, primary residence with you if she moves out, or nesting if you both stay until we sell. 70-30 time split while school is in session, 50-50 in summer if he wants. You can decline to pursue fault even if there is fault. That keeps the focus where you want it. We draft for mediation first and hard court second. How much evidence do you need? I asked. That word like a mouthful of nails. She steepled her fingers. Enough to feel steady if she tries to rewrite the narrative. But if your goal is the schedule and not punishment, we don't need a highlight reel of anyone's worst night. A call log helps. A receipt or two helps. A therapist's note that says, "Father has acted in the child's interest," helps. We don't need proof that shocks a jury on TV. We need a judge to glance and nod. I can do glancing and nodding, I said. She gave me a list that was the opposite of sensational school attendance records. Logan's activity schedules, proof of my flexible work hours, notes from Dr. Klaus. And one more thing, she said. Practice this sentence. We have grown apart. Our parenting plan centers Logan's needs. You will say it to her. You will say it to her parents. You will write it in an email. You will write it in an email. You will write it in an email. You will not add because of, even when you want to. What about the other number? I asked before I could swallow it. What if she's... If she is, Amelia said without making me finish. Your restraint will look like strength in a room that matters. If she denies, we do not play detective at the table. We say, the details are not for tonight. I left with a folder thicker than I'd expected and lighter than I feared. The rain had graduated to that fine mist that coats your glasses in enough water to justify taking them off. I stood under the awning and texted Nate, Project Greenlit. He sent back a photo of a stack of old oak boards and the caption, "Going to teach your boy to make something that holds." Tessa found the box in Logan's room before Christmas. Not the evidence box. I don't keep an evidence box. The box with sandpaper, ear protection, a pair of safety glasses, and a card from Nate that said, "You're hired, kid." She held the glasses like a prop from someone else's life. "What is this?" she asked, smile of someone who has decided to be sweet if sweetness keeps the conversation from being useful. "Logan's going to work with Nate more," I said. "He wants to. They'll build something real. He'll sleep here. He'll go to school, but he'll spend more weekends at Nate's shop." And I was not consulted, she said. Wait on the word like it could support a house. "You're being consulted now," I said. "You can come watch them plane a board if you want." She looked at me as if I'd suggested snowshoeing to her hair appointment. I'm swamped at the clinic, she said. We've had 2 girls go on leave. That's fine, I said, and watched the relief and irritation fight on her face. Relief that I wasn't asking her to show up, irritation that I wasn't giving her something to push against. I asked her to come to Dr. Klaus with me the next week. She said maybe, then said fine, then rescheduled twice, then showed up with her coat still on. Dr. Klaus didn't take sides. She built a table we could both sit at. Tessa crossed her legs like she was auditioning for Reasonable. I said the sentences I had practiced. I want to do this carefully. I want Logan's routine protected. I want us to have a plan. Tessa said, I didn't realize we were in a crisis. Dr. Klaus didn't look at me for help or at her for blame, she said. Sometimes planning is what keeps something from becoming a crisis. Tessa's mouth did that tired smile again. Drew likes plans, she said, then turned to the therapist. He likes spreadsheets, color-coded calendars. He hates surprises. That's his way of feeling safe. I like feeling safe, Dr. Klaus said. You? Tessa laughed. I like feeling alive, she said, like safety and aliveness were opposite. They talked. I stayed steady. At the end, Dr. Klaus asked if we would both be willing to consider a co-parenting mediation after the holidays to map out the schedule and the financials. Not because divorce is certain, she said, because clarity helps families even if they decide to stay together. Tessa said, This is dramatic. I said, This is responsible. Tessa looked at me as if she'd already started narrating me to someone else, controlling, rigid, needs control because he's afraid. I let her have the ghost of that sentence if it got us to the part where our kid knew who was helping with homework on Wednesdays. Things got quieter in a way that's loud when you live inside it. She worked late more. Logan packed his backpack with extra socks for Nate's shop and texted me pictures of wood chips in his hair like a dog rolled in the river and felt proud of the smell. We're building a bench you'd sit on without thinking about it, he wrote. That's the point. At the clinic holiday party, I went for the first time in years. I wanted to see the humans she named in her stories, and I wanted to know, without any sleuthing ugliness, how the room felt. The party was at a place on Alberta that makes cocktails out of shrubs and conversations out of other people's business. Her coworkers hugged me because that's how Portland apologizes for living in such close quarters. The clinic owner, a woman whose eyes could balance on a string of dental floss, told me what a rock Tessa has been with staffing. I said nothing about rocks and what they can do to windshields. I saw him because my body recognized the way Tessa stood before my brain did. The weight over one hip, the laugh she saves for someone who makes her forget the time. He was tall, beard neat enough to look like a decision, a clinic rep from some vendor if his name badge meant anything. He said something low and she leaned in like air, has gravity. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. It was nothing anyone would call a betrayal in a room where music played. It was everything I needed to know about how effortlessly a person can move their weight onto a ledge that isn't in their house. I didn't ask her about him. I drove home with Logan, who had sneaked an extra brownie into his pocket and handed it to me in the car like a conspiracy against Kale. We watched a Christmas tree lot's lights blink up and down Hawthorne while a couple argued politely about wreath sizes on the sidewalk. Can we go to Nate's early tomorrow? He asked. He wants to show me the planer. Yeah, I said. Let's pack tonight. I sent Amelia Chen an email that would read well in court. Following our consultation, I propose we schedule a mediation in January focused on a co-parenting calendar, with an initial draft attached. I would like to avoid fault-based argument and center Logan's needs. She wrote back, Excellent. I'll prepare a neutral packet and I'll ask the mediator to schedule us after New Year's. Please continue with therapy and keep a paper trail of school and activities. I put the packet together like a man building a kit with all the pieces labeled, Logan's track meets, his tutoring schedule, my work hours, proof I can do school drop-off on Mondays and Thursdays, a letter from Dr. Klaus that said nothing unkind and everything useful. father has demonstrated consistent concern for child's emotional well-being, recommends stability and predictable routines. No smoking guns, no printed call logs. Only the minimum required to convince the only audience that matters if you're not trying to win the internet. The person with a gavel who hates melodrama. Tessa stayed gone later and came home smelling like a bar where they washed the glasses with lemon. She was careful to talk about it before I could. I grabbed a late drink with Janelle, she'd say, naming a coworker I liked because her stories about clumsy toddlers learning to walk on rebuilt ankles always made Logan laugh. I didn't ask what Janelle ordered. I said, "Okay," and loaded the dishwasher like a man whose hands keep him from saying words that make a room catch fire. Dr. Klaus asked me one week if I felt proud of myself yet. For what? I asked, because pride felt like something other people earned and I tracked. For not making your fear louder than your son's needs, she said. I want him to remember that the adults stayed adults, I said. If I have to be the only one in the room who is boring, I can do boring. Boring is a grace, she said. I wrote that down and circled it even though you don't usually have to circle grace to remember it. On the Sunday before Christmas, Nate and Logan called me from the shop on FaceTime. The image stuttered because his shop, Wi-Fi, is like a prayer. Weak, sincere, occasionally answered. They showed me a bench seat so clean you couldn't see where the wood changed grain. He did the last pass, Nate said. I only pretended to help. Logan's face did that open thing faces do when they've made a thing they can point at that isn't a grade or a sentence. It doesn't wobble, he said. Good, I said. Your mother hates wobble. He looked at the floor, then at me. Do you think she'll... I think she'll sit on it, I said. And I think she'll say it's beautiful, because it is. When we brought it home, Tessa hadn't been at the house when we said she would be. She texted, "Sorry, running late, be there soon." We set the bench by the window, where the plants forgive me because they already miss her diligence. When she came in, cheeks bright because the air was a slap, she saw the bench and smiled a real smile I recognized from other rooms where time wasn't a weapon. You made that, she said to Logan like a question that wanted to be a statement. I mean, Uncle Nate helped, Logan said, suddenly shy. She sat, tested it like a customer in a showroom, and laughed. It doesn't wobble, she said. It's kind of the point, Logan said, and looked at me, and we had this flicker of a moment where a father gets to be exactly the thing he wants his son to have in his life, predictable as gravity. We ate soup. We watched the Blazers play like they forgot how to play and still somehow win. We all pretended we were the kind of family who only needed to decide where to put a piece of furniture. Later, Tessa went to the bedroom and made a call with her voice set to warm. The door wasn't closed. It wasn't open either. There's a sound doors make when they want to be metaphors. I washed the bowls and let the water run longer than necessary because I did not trust myself to turn it off without thinking of something I wasn't going to say. The next morning, I printed the mediation proposal and slid it into a folder with our names. I wrote Tessa a note, not an accusation, not a speech. The kind of letter a judge could frame if judges were in the business of framing things that keep houses together. It said, I think we are changing. I want to do that in a way that keeps Logan whole. I want to sit with a mediator and build a calendar. I am not going to catalog hurts. I am going to prioritize school, track, and sleep. Please say yes to the meeting so we can start the part where this stops being something our son has to guess about. I left it on the counter with a pen. She texted at 11:30, we can discuss tonight. The 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared, vanished again. I could picture her composing a paragraph that tried to make me the plot or tried to buy time. Then, fine, schedule it. I sent Amelia the green light. She booked us. January 9th, 10 a.m., a room with a round table and a box of Kleenex that probably goes unused when people like me show up. I marked it on the calendar as if I were marking a dental cleaning. When Logan got home that night, he stomped snowmelt off his shoes and grinned like the cold was a dare he'd just won. "Uncle Nate gave me my own chisel," he said, reverenced the way some kids are about guitars. He held it up, edge protected, handle smooth with a promise of work. "It's late," I said. "You want to sleep at Nate's tomorrow like we talked about? Start the project week early?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I think, yeah, before school ramps up again." "Good," I said. "Pack a bag. We'll tell your mom when she gets home." We waited. The house sounded like a house sounds when it knows it needs to learn a new language. The rain found the window that never seals. The bench didn't wobble. At 9, Tessa texted that she'd be late again. At 10:30, she didn't text anything at all. Logan knocked on my office door holding a duffel. "Is it okay if I sleep at Nate's tonight?" he asked, not quite whispering, not wanting me to think he was asking for permission he didn't deserve. "It's okay," I said. "I'll drive you. Text him, we're coming." He nodded and slung the bag over his shoulder like a runner putting on weight he knows he can carry. We stepped into the hallway. I grabbed the folder with the mediation date. I left the letter where it lay, pen uncapped beside it like a promise the room could keep without me in it. When I locked the door, I did it quietly. I don't know why that matters, but it did. The street was glossy with fresh rain. Logan fell asleep halfway to Hillsborough with his mouth open just enough for a soft snore, a kid sound clinging to a man's body. Nate met us at the door in socks and a t-shirt that said, "Sawdust is man glitter because my brother is a certain kind of fool." He took Logan's bag like it contained expensive glassware and pointed him to the spare room. "We start at 9, he whispered. "No earlier. I'm not a monster." Back in the truck, Nate looked at me the way brothers do when the usual jokes aren't tools for the job. "You want a beer?" he asked, knowing the answer. "I want this to be gentle," I said, surprising myself with the word again. He nodded. "Gentle doesn't mean soft. It means clean." I drove back into the city that was always a little damp. The house lights were off when I opened the door. The letter was still on the counter, the pen uncapped, a tiny dot of ink bleeding into the paper where the tip touched. Tessa's phone sat face down on the table where we eat. It buzzed once, a tiny insect trapped under glass. I didn't turn it over. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway to Logan's room and looked at the bed he wasn't in. It looked wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because he should be here. Right because I was the one who made sure he didn't have to be. Not tonight. My own phone lit up with a message from Amelia. "Mediation confirmed for Jan 9, 10 a.m. Please avoid content arguments between now and then." I typed, "Understood." The house hummed the quiet hum of a structure doing its job. I went to sleep on top of the covers and woke twice in the night, thinking the rain was someone knocking gently. It wasn't. Not yet. January 9th arrived like a dentist appointment you've known about and still somehow hoped would move itself. The mediator's office was on the 5th floor of a brick building near the river. A room with a round table, a plant that looked too glossy to be real, and a clock that ticked just loud enough to remind you, time has a spine. Amelia met me in the hallway and gave me the kind of nod you give a person before a 5K. This is not a marathon. Breathe like it's a run, you know. Tessa came in 5 minutes late with a scarf looped so carefully it might have been a shield. She didn't meet my eyes at first. Then she did, and smiled like a professional at a networking lunch, and I realized what Dr. Klaus meant about broad and true. Narrow and true is a scalpel. Broad and true is a table that can hold weight. The mediator, a woman named Charlene with reading glasses on a chain, opened neatly. She explained we weren't there to prove anything other than we could be adults in a room. "Parenting plan only," she said, tapping a yellow pad. "If we go off-road, I steer us back." Amelia put our draft calendar on the table and slid one copy toward Tessa, the way you slide a menu in a restaurant that doesn't take reservations. "Monday and Thursday, overnights with me, alternating weekends. Tuesday, dinner with her. Saturday mornings flexible for track meets. Summer split down the middle with Logan's input written into the actual sentences. School year stability. Exams protected. May and June marked for regionals. The holidays rotated like a compass. Tessa scanned without reading. This looks predetermined. It looks like a starting point, Charlene said. We poured the cement together. Tessa's mouth did that thing again, a shape that says both, I'm above this, and I'm not sure where to put my hands. She looked up. So, we're doing this, like actually doing this. I heard the invitation to argue about whether we were doing this or whether this was an overreaction. I stayed broad. We're making sure Logan has a clear schedule, I said. He shouldn't have to wonder which house has the pasta on Wednesdays. Charlene smiled at that. Good, she said. Food is a calendar. The first 90 minutes were a negotiation between calendars and egos. Tessa wanted Thursdays because her clinic moved staff meetings, and she wanted to be the fun parent on Fridays. Amelia suggested a swap and a test period, which Charlene translated into people language. We try it and ask your son in March how it's working, without making him vote. We carved out protected school night study time and a rule that said no new significant others at overnights for 6 months. I did not look up when that clause landed. I kept my eyes on the map we were drawing. When money came up, Charlene's voice got more practical. You both make similar salaries, yes? We handed over pay stubs like they were biographies. Amelia had already done the math. Expenses for track shoes, tutoring, therapy shared. House. We'd try nesting for 90 days, so Logan lived in one bed while we took turns in the guest room, then list the house with a realtor. Tessa's friend liked. I would rent a 2-bedroom within a 5-mile radius of Logan's school. Tessa could stay in Selwood until the sale, then find her own place. The spreadsheet said it could work. The people in the room agreed to try. There was a moment near the end when the conversation wanted to pivot. Tessa's voice warmed and then sharpened like a stick in a campfire. Is this really because you're mad that I go out with friends? The room held its breath the way a room does when it knows a fight is lurking behind a half-open door. Charlene lifted a hand. We're not adjudicating causes, she said quietly. We're writing a manual for a life that continues. I could feel the sentence I had practiced lining up like a row of bricks. We have grown apart, I said. Our parenting plan centers Logan's needs. The words felt like standing on level ground. Tessa stared at me long enough to register that I wasn't going to take the bait. Her jaw unclenched a notch. Fine, she said, but the dog is mine. The dog is very obviously yours, I said, and for a second we both smirked like the people who used to tease each other instead of talk like attorneys. We left with a draft that looked like a city map drawn in pencil. Amelia was pleased without gloating. Charlene scheduled a second session for end of month to finalize. In the elevator, Tessa finally looked at me without the scarf in the way. I don't know how we got here, she said. I do, I said, and then swallowed the rest. It would have been so easy to turn the elevator into a courtroom. Instead, I said, Logan starts a new training block next week. He needs to know who's picking him up on Tuesdays. She nodded, the little practical nod that had built a lot of our marriage. I'll do Tuesdays, she said, and Saturdays when I don't have clinic. The nesting period was both kinder and stranger than I imagined. We overlapped as little as possible, passing the house like a baton. There's a choreography to not bumping into each other in your own kitchen. You leave notes about groceries in neutral ink. You put your boxes in the garage and label them with nouns. Bedroom, office, tools. You take turns sleeping in the bed that was both of yours and pretend the sheets don't remember who sweated in them. You learn how to pack your life for a 3-day stretch and the perfect number of socks to forget. The first week, Logan watched us like a scientist watches 2 chemicals in a beaker that might foam up. By week 2, he started letting it be real. He asked the questions a smart kid asks when the adults prove they can survive answers. Will we still go to Forest Park on Sundays sometimes? Who gets me on my birthday if my birthday lands on a Monday? Do I have to keep my stuff separate, like a divorce in Ziplocs? We told him the truth. Yes, we hike. Birthdays belong to him, not the calendar, and we'll both be there for cake, unless he asks otherwise. And no, he doesn't have to live out of bags inside a house that's still his. We told him this part isn't punishment. It's a remodel with the lights on. He came home from Nate's every Sunday with sawdust in his hair and new language in his mouth. Joinery, mortise and tenon, square, plumb. Words that sneak into regular sentences and make them feel like you could fix them if they broke. When I drove him back one Wednesday, he said, "You and Uncle Nate are similar. He doesn't use a lot of words, and then he made a motion with his hands that meant cuts once measure twice. I use too many words," I said, "but I'm trying to measure twice." He smirked. "Dr. Klaus says you're good at letting the silence not scare you." I laughed. That's because she gets paid per hour. We had a second session with Charlene 2 weeks later. Tessa came in on time and read the revised plan like a person who knows she'll sign it. She asked for a slight adjustment for a certification course she wanted to take in April. Amelia added a clause for FaceTime on nights when the schedule makes people miss each other. We chose a realtor. We picked a listing date. It all felt like a machine clicking into gear, like chain on a bike that finally catches after slipping. The only time the control panel flickered was when Tessa's mother asked for a meeting. She has a voice like a car with a misaligned wheel, always a little pull to the side. We sat in her living room in Lake Oswego under a painting of a sailboat that has never met an ocean. She poured tea like a peace treaty and then said, "Is there a possibility this is a phase?" I used my sentence again because it works. "We have grown apart," I said softly. Our plan centers Logan's needs. Her eyes filmed over with a kind of disappointment that wanted a villain. "But why?" she asked, looking at me, hunting for a crack to pry open. "Because families change," I said. "He needs to sleep. He needs to know where his shoes are. He needs to run track and remember this year as the year he got faster, not the year the adults made a mess." Tessa's father, who usually watches football as his second religion, cleared his throat. "The boy looks good," he said. "He looks steady." That word in his mouth felt like a medal. On a Tuesday night in late January, I got the call I had planned for without inviting. Tessa's voice was wet with the kind of crying that makes walls feel like they're leaning in. "Can you come get Logan?" she asked. "I have an emergency." "What's wrong?" I asked, instinct rising, and then I caught myself. Even now, even here, boundaries are a gift you give both of you. "Where is he?" I asked instead. "Home," she said. "He's home. I'm at." She stopped, and I didn't ask her to finish. "Please, Drew." "I'm on my way," I said. Logan was on the couch, shoes off, homework open, unaware of anything other than a physics problem that made him look like the adult in a cartoon. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something burnt off a pan. "Mom okay?" he asked. "She will be," I said. "You good to crash at my place?" He packed like an athlete going to a meet. We left a note where she would see it that said, "He's with me, he's safe, I'll do drop-off." On the drive, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't try to parent either of us. He rolled down the window an inch and let the cold remind him he has skin. "Coach says I can drop 2 seconds by spring," he said. "You can," I said. "Your form's cleaner. Turnover's better." "Coach also says I overstride," he said, then laughed, which is probably the most on-brand thing anyone's ever said. The next day, Tessa texted a single sentence. I never expected from her. I told him, "It's over." I answered with a sentence I had practiced for exactly this. "Thank you for keeping adult conversations with adults. I'll keep the schedule steady." In February, the mediator sent over the final plan. We both signed. The court stamped it with a date that felt ceremonial and small all at once. Neither of us posted anything because we aren't the kind of people who make our lives into strategies for strangers. We told the people who needed to be told with the same sentence we've been using. We have grown apart. Our parenting plan centers Logan's needs. It is astonishing how fast that sentence shuts the door on intrusive curiosity when you say it clean. Nesting worked until it didn't. In March, we listed the house. The photos made our rooms look staged because, by then, they were. Logan picked what he wanted to keep in a way that showed me we'd done something right. He wanted the bench by the window and the stupid cowbell from the first track meet I yelled at like a fool, and the chess set he never uses but likes touching because it reminds him of a tournament where he sat still for 5 hours and almost won. Everything else was A. I found a 2-bedroom off SE Woodstock that smelled like someone loved coffee and light. It had north-facing windows that made mornings a little sad and afternoons glow like forgiveness. We moved the bench first, because of course we did. It looked good against the long wall, and even better with Logan's spikes under it. On the first night in the new place, he sat on the bench and said, "It doesn't wobble here either." "It won't," I said. "We built it not to." At school, Logan got faster. There's something about repetition that makes a body learn it doesn't have to panic every time the gun goes off. He started sleeping like sleep was a place he was allowed to visit, not a guest room in his own mind. The tight chest became an occasional knock instead of a nightly alarm. Dr. Klaus wrote a note for court we didn't need anymore, but I kept it in the folder anyway because sometimes you want a professional to confirm you didn't imagine the mountain you climbed. Child presents with reduced anxiety following implementation of predictable routines, it said. That sounds like a recipe, but it reads like relief. Tessa and I learned the logistics of being kind when you're not together. We used a co-parenting app that time-stamped messages and kept the tone from slipping into old grooves. We defaulted to yes for anything that made Logan's life fuller. An extra practice. A weekend at the coast with Nate when the weather pretended it wasn't February. A Sunday morning running clinic with a former collegiate sprinter who taught him to love drills. We said no to things that made our lives messier. Last-minute swaps that didn't serve him. Conversations after midnight that only existed to scratch at scabs. In April, the vendor guy vanished, like people do when they realize alive and good are not synonyms. Tessa didn't tell me the story. I didn't ask for it. The only evidence was absence, and the absence was loud enough. On a Tuesday exchange, she stood on my steps with a bag of Logan's track stuff and looked not younger, not older, just finally her real age. "Thank you," she said. And for a second, it was like we were standing on our old porch about to go in and make dinner while the rain had the decency to stay outside. "For what?" I asked. "Not fishing." "For the calendar," she said. "For not making it a spectacle." I nodded. "For the bench," I almost said, which would have made no sense and every kind of sense. In May, at Districts, Logan ran like a kid who'd learned how to run away from something without making running away his personality. He took the turn smooth, let his arms do their job, and finished with a face so open with disbelief, you'd think nobody had ever told him he was allowed to be good. Tessa and I stood 10 feet apart and yelled the same word at the same time. After, when he hugged us both, and smelled like effort and spring air, he didn't look like a child of divorce. He looked like a runner who knows where his people stand. Selling the house hurt less than I expected and more than I wanted. The day we signed the papers, I walked through rooms already empty of our furniture, each one exhaling. In Logan's room, I put my hand on the wall where his bed used to be and was surprised that my body did not turn to ash. On the way out, I took the plant from the window that had somehow not died. Tessa took the dog and the blue mixing bowl that makes pancakes taste like Saturday. We left the keys for the new family and stood on the porch one last time pretending we didn't both remember every fight we'd had at this door. And every time we'd come back through it with groceries and jokes we needed to tell each other before they expired. At the curb, Tessa reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. For a second, I thought it would be a speech. It was a receipt from that bar on Alberta, dated a lifetime ago, creased and soft with handling. She held it like it wasn't poisonous anymore. "I don't need this," she said. "I don't either," I said. She handed it to me like a person hands a baton they don't plan to chase. I didn't keep it. I walked it to the little green recycling bin and let it go. Portland loves its rituals. June brought sun that didn't feel like something you had to apologize for. Logan set a PR. Nate came to a meet and yelled like a man who used to yell at high school football games with a beer in his hand and now yells with a water bottle because cholesterol is not a rumor. After the meet, we all got ice cream and sat on the bench in my apartment like a family that could do that without footnotes. Tessa texted me a photo later of Logan asleep on her couch with the dog's chin on his knee. "He's good," she wrote. "He's really good." By August, the plan had become the air. Exchanges were not events, they were commutes. The co-parenting app became mostly schedule updates and the occasional "he forgot his spikes." Therapy sessions spaced out, not because we graduated from pain, but because we built enough muscle memory to keep walking around it instead of through it every time. The only time the old sharpness returned was a single Tuesday night when the house felt too quiet, and I wondered if grace counts if no one sees you practice it. Then Logan called, not because he needed anything, but because he wanted to tell me about a drill he finally nailed. "Coach says my stride isn't reaching now," he said. "I'm keeping my hips under me. It feels calmer." "Yeah," I said. "That's what fast feels like." He laughed. "Dr. Klaus is going to use running metaphors next." "She already does," I said. "She calls what we did pacing." On the first day of school, I took the photo you take on the porch you now rent. He stood taller than the doorframe, backpack slung like a prop. The bench was in the background like a piece of punctuation. He looked into the camera with a face that belonged to a person inside his own life. We sent the photo to Tessa and to Nate and to my parents and to Tessa's parents and to Dr. Klaus, because some people get to watch you cross a finish line even if they didn't pay for tickets. That night, Logan and I went for our run. It was the thing we'd built into the week like a pillar. Early morning Saturdays and Tuesday evenings, rain or not. We don't talk much when we run. Words bounce out of you and disappear unless they matter. We did the loop past the food trucks and the park where a jazz trio sometimes practices in the gazebo. On the last stretch, he pushed, and I let him go because my job is not to beat him. It's to be the reason he doesn't have to slow down. Back home, while he showered, I stood by the bench and looked at the shoe prints under it. They are not symbolic, they are literal. And still, looking at them made something unclench. The plan had become life. Life had become less about what I could prove and more about what didn't wobble. Every once in a while, usually when the rain finds that window that never seals, I think about the alternate version of me, the one who turned a spreadsheet into a knife, who went hunting for screenshots, who exploded a family in a living room so he could be right in a way that leaves marks. I don't judge that guy. I understand him in my bones. But I'm not him. I'm the boring grace guy. And you know what? Boring turned out to be a superpower when the person who mattered most needed a dad who could make Tuesdays look like Tuesdays. If you're waiting for a twist where she begs to come back, or he meets someone new, and suddenly the story becomes a different genre, I can't give you that. What I can give you is this: a 16-year-old who gained time instead of losing childhood. A house we walked away from without slamming the door. A bench that doesn't wobble in two different homes. And a calendar that tells a kid exactly when he's supposed to be where, so he can run as if the ground belongs to him. What would you have done, different, gone full detective, to get the truth to the bone, or kept the focus on a calm exit for the kid? Drop your take in the comments, and if this story resonated, hit like and subscribe. Your engagement helps us make more deep dive stories like this.